What is up, everybody? I bid you welcome to Rats on Film, the show where a bunch of film rats talk about and rank movies. It is spooky season, it's upon us, so we are going to be talking about the classic Universal monster movies. On the show with me today, I have Jordan.
Hello.
Taylor.
Hi.
Chris.
Hello.
And I'm your host, Xander. Welcome to the show, everybody. Now, there's a debate amongst the rat community about when spooky season officially starts. I feel like I'm outvoted on it amongst this podcast.
Late August for me.
Early August.
Too early. Too early.
Yeah. It's a smooth transition from Summerween.
Spooky season's fall.
No.
Yeah. Because there's like a lot of, you got to like slowly ramp into it. It's not like full blown the day that it begins. You just kind of like start and then it builds momentum.
I also feel like summer horror is a huge genre. Like,
it's true.
A vibe.
Too early, but it is spooky season now. So we're going to be talking about the Universal monster movies. We had a debate about which ones were going to get included on it. I think the only one that potentially could have warranted a spot on it that we didn't do is Phantom of the Opera. If you're a fan of that one, sorry. But all the other big ones, just the first, except for we did one sequel because it's good.
Well, we're counting all the ones that Universal themselves put in all the collections that they physically release, all the merch that they do. This is basically their picks.
Yeah, if you go to Universal Studios, you're going to see all these monsters very highly represented. All right, so let's get into it. Starting off with the original monster movie, Dracula, 1931. We've got a couple vampire girlies on the podcast today. How does this compare for you as a vampire movie?
I mean, it's so iconic. It's classic. I understand it was groundbreaking at the time. As someone who was familiar with the character of Dracula before attempting to read the book because I've never finished it and seeing this movie, I was really disappointed the first time I watched it. I think the performances are good for what it is, but I still wanted more.
I think the disconnect of this is this was during the Depression, and they wanted to do Dracula, and at first they wanted to adapt a book, but that would have been very expensive. So they adapted a very popular stage play at the time, which I think Bella was already in. Mm-hmm. So it becomes much smaller scale than any real other Dracula stories that are out there.
In some ways it was set up to fail, and it's cool that it didn't, and it has the legacy that it does have, but I feel like you can kind of feel some of that energy in the final product so far removed.
Yeah.
I think Bella knew what movie he was in, but everyone else was just making a Hollywood picture. But Bella brought the monster to the movie. And I think that in and of itself kicked off the Universal monsters, like being a thing.
Yeah, we can't really go past it without talking about the cast. Bela Lugosi it wouldn't have been as popular without him, really.
Yeah, definitely not. I feel like even to this day, people who don't know who Bela Lugosi is know what the Dracula version is. And it's kind of not even the weird thing about this movie is it's not even a super big part of the movie. There's so much standing and talking of other randos that he doesn't actually do that much, but the moments that he is on screen, it's kind of crazy how impactful it's been.
He's able to play this kind of aloof, immortal monster kind of very well, but also not like he still has the charming friendliness that you need from a character that's supposed to seduce other people.
Yeah, one thing that I and this is not a criticism of his performance at all, but it's actually of the script, is that I kind of wish that we didn't know Dracula was a threat so early on, because I feel like Bella does a really good job at like doing that traditional vampire, balancing the suave with the scary. And I think once this movie begins, we know like Dracula is a vampire. We know that he's scary. We know that you shouldn't go near him. And we know that he's going to be the main threat of the movie. But I kind of wish that unfolded in a way that more modern vampire movies tend to do, where like you think they're human at first and then you realize they're a vampire.
It's so interesting later on with Van Helsing, where he immediately knows exactly what to do to stop vampires. And I think that is such a missed opportunity to have the main characters figure out like, oh, what's happening? How do we stop this guy? Like, we don't even know. They just go, okay, here's the list of things to do to stop a vampire. That I think you could have added a lot to the movie not being as boring, I guess, if it wasn't just exposition after exposition after exposition of like, hey, this is what's happening.
I think also the lack of score really drags this one down compared to some of the later ones. Like, you feel the dead air, like a very oppressive weight when no one is speaking in the room and they're all just kind of looking at each other and you hear the like set creaking around them.
It's such a strange thing that they were afraid that audience was not going to understand musical scores in films.
Yeah. It's weird because it opens with music and you're like, hell yeah, we're in it. And then silence.
I definitely think this era of film, which is this maybe the earliest film you've covered on Rats,
It's
like the
probably.
oldest. But like this era still has the very hard problem of being a play, a theater, instead of a film. Now, other films before this, silent films, did it pretty well, like German Expressionism and stuff, that the later Universal monster movies took more, but like it still feels like it's trying to be theater, not a film itself, which allows it for these like no music, wide shot of just people walking around, just standing there.
But I think too, we'll talk about it in a lot of them, but it's kind of a trend in all of them, what you're talking about, where a lot of the performances are very theatrical. Obviously, we got to shout out Renfield screaming rats, 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 full of blood.
Oh, man.
I love Renfield.
R.I.P.
in this.
Renfield. He really did not deserve his miserable fate.
He kind of did. He was warned.
No, I feel bad for him. And I feel bad for him in every version of Dracula I've ever seen.
As I said, they explain everything word for word, exactly what you need to know. And he just goes, nah.
I think the actor's name is Dwight Fry. He's, I think, so good in this role, truthfully, and brings some of the more creepy elements of this horror film, like the shot of down below the boat deck with the light surrounding him, and he just has this like manic face, or him crawling on the ground to the maid is just like some of the creepier moments of the film.
Yeah, it is interesting because I've not seen any of these films until the first one I watched was like last year. So all of these are very new to me, and watching them exclusively with the modern lens, like not even like 20 years ago, modern lens. And thinking about people being so terrified by these when this movie is so you don't even see blood other than when he gets a paper cut, which is just insane for a Dracula movie, for a vampire movie. He doesn't, there's no teeth marks. You don't see any kills happen on screen. It's really interesting that this was so terrifying to people at that time.
It's crazy too, because this is pre-code, so they could have done whatever they wanted.
In some ways, I would always say showing, not telling is better, but I don't know. I think you could argue that like the paper cut is enough because like you're thinking about what could happen beyond that, and the fear in your imagination is always going to be scarier than whatever they can pull off on screen. But I don't know if that's quite true here. Good start.
All right, so Dracula, top of the list for now. Moving on. Same year, Frankenstein, also 1931, based on the iconic novel by Mary Shelley. They did her real dirty.
Yeah.
The credits. We were appalled by this.
Mrs. Percy Shelley.
How dare
I
they?
don't quite know what they were thinking.
Yeah, they were not thinking.
Again, this is another opportunity, another instance of them not having the budget to want to do the full actual story and kind of doing a workaround. I don't think it's based on a play or anything like that, but they definitely tried to fit it to their budget and runtime, really.
I just read Frankenstein for the first time last year. Loved it. Thought it was great. It is fascinating reading it after not even seeing the film, but just knowing, again, talking about how these set up the iconic versions of the characters, no matter how many iterations there have been. Everybody thinks of like arms out, metal prods in the neck, square head, like all those kinds of things. Not at all what the version is in the book, but kind of crazy that they were able to make such an iconic monster that has really stood the test of time, not even based on the source material.
Why are you reading? I thought we don't read on this.
Yeah, Johnny's going to be mad.
I think this film succeeds a little bit more than Dracula, and I think it really comes down to James Whale, the director, who I think is the best director out of any of them on any of these. And not that, Bella's bad, but Boris Karloff is fantastic as the monster itself, with such a weird non-speaking part, which is kind of not the norm for films of this time period, really.
Yeah, I think the performance from Dr. Frankenstein, Colin Clive, was also really good. I think having a compelling non-monster character as kind of a dual protagonist helps this one a little bit more than Dracula too, because I feel like the characters in Dracula just kind of blend together a little bit. Like, like I get it, but I don't know. But this one, like there feels like there's a bit more of a story arc for multiple characters in the movie.
I think a bit of that kind of breaks down to this one having like a more cohesive source material and just like coming from the book rather than coming from like an attempted amalgamation of a stage play that was based on a book that wasn't like one-to-one. And this one was just like, here's the novel, here's the little parts we're going to take out of it and just move to the screen. And I think that kind of like allowed them to hone in on like scope of the story a little bit more in this one than they did in Dracula.
I am mad that they changed his name to Henry, though.
That's crazy. Yeah,
that's a classic, like, oh, Americans won't like Victor.
It's weird because they use Victor for another character.
The nicer character in the film,
insane,
too.
Which is insane.
Yeah, just a really weird choice.
I mean, Boris gets a lot of good praise. Like, necessarily, he gets a lot of praise. But Colin, he deserves a lot, too, because he plays it so well. Mm-hmm. This kind of manic energy, but also he's, like, on the edge of being sane. Mm-hmm. He performs, I mean, the iconic "It's Alive" that everyone knows. It's so good. And then like his other lines about being God, which is great. And he just performs it with such a great way.
To your point about the Dr. Frankenstein character adding a lot to this, I do feel like you get into a really interesting territory where these are all called monster movies. And what everybody always thinks about in them is the monsters. And the monsters are, at least in the context of the films, the villains. But I think Frankenstein falls in a really interesting spot, which some of these other ones will as well, where is the monster the villain? And I think this movie is really interesting in that way, where Victor has this God complex, like you're saying, this manic, mad scientist thing, and he creates something that he had probably no right to do. And then you kind of had to see the suffering that gets inflicted on the town, but also the monster itself, the creation itself. And I think that that's really cool about this one.
But also the town becomes sort of an antagonist also. Absolutely. If you look at it from the perspective of the monster himself, which is something that I just find so fascinating about this story in general, not even just the film. But you have the monster, which everyone assumes is the bad guy, but really the doctor is the bad guy for creating it. But then also the town is the bad guy for not even taking a second to think about anything and just turning into this crazed mob. Like
the instant vilification.
Yeah.
That girl
so interesting.
Killed herself. She was 1 foot away from the shore. She could have walked.
It's a great scene, and it's really sad for the monster. But also, it's an interesting piece for me for history of that it was shot before the code, and then after they had to cut that out. And it's just such a strange thing to cut out a very important piece of the character and thinking that for decades it was lost forever. For a long time that people just saw that version of the movie.
It's like, yeah, that's the reason to get fired up about him. Like taking that out of the movie, that gives the crazed mob no justification.
So basically it's just like she just dies and you assume he killed her, but without actually seeing the scene, you lose so much.
Well, I think it's the most important scene in the movie because it shows you the context of the monster. He doesn't kill her maliciously. You know, I think it's her fault. You know, you could argue. He pushed her. He threw her. Whatever.
He wasn't smart enough to understand.
He just thought, oh, flowers are fun to throw. Like little girls are fun to throw. I don't know what he's thinking.
She did say, do you want to see how I make boats?
He thought she's a boat too.
Yeah, he doesn't know what boat is, but the childishness, the fact that this creature is an infant with no knowledge and is just trying to explore the world, and it's just constantly being attacked by Fritz, throwing torches at him.
Yeah,
Fritz deserves his death.
Yeah, he had it coming.
Some of the set pieces, like even just the room where they build the monster and they lift it, like incredible. Like even movies nowadays, they don't feel that real because they built it and because it was all practical. It holds up when you watch it however many years later.
Even the reuse of the universal backlog again, but dressing it differently looks great because it's a physical place. You feel like it's really there.
What is it, Germany? Too.
It's supposed to be Germany,
The
right?
scenes where they cut out to Germany make me laugh though, because it just looks like a Renaissance festival.
Yeah.
But what I will say is, I'd prefer it look like a Renaissance festival and feel real than be like a volume stage.
No, I love it.
And
to be clear,
have like Germany in the background. Like you can just tell it just kind of has this like grittiness to it that really grounds it, which I feel like in a monster movie is important.
Where do you guys want to put this one?
this is above Dracula for me.
Yeah, same.
I agree.
Yeah, easily. Book's better than the movie, though.
It's not a book pod.
We don't talk about books. No one reads here.
Next up, The Mummy. Not the one with Brendan Fraser, the one from 1932. Once again, though, Boris Karloff.
This is the second time I've watched this film. The first time, I was incredibly disappointed about how little the mummy's actually in it in his mummy form. Obviously, he is in it, but he's not craggly. I didn't hate it as much the second time I've seen it.
It's just a boring one, isn't it?
Yeah.
The premise itself is vaguely interesting. Of this guy who is a mummy who had some curse on him, and now he's come back to life to resurrect his girlfriend who got killed. Okay. And then that's all they did with it.
Yeah, I think this one also falls victim really heavily to the people standing around and explaining what's happening instead of anything actually happening. There's just so many scenes in this movie that are like 5 guys standing in a room talking at each other, not even with each other.
Yeah, it's weird because the opening is actually pretty interesting. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's a really cool idea here where these archaeologists uncover this tomb with this mummified guy, and they're kind of making these inspections, and they're like, oh, he was buried alive because he was struggling in the bandages. And then they find this curse, and they're like, and the one guy goes, do not open this thing.
Idiot reads it.
And then some loser who wants to be famous is like, I'll do it. And then he goes insane from seeing the mummy and die. In dialogue, they just go, he died laughing. And you're like, okay, almost missed that, but fair enough. That's kind of interesting. Then they do nothing else. There's not anything that's super compelling beyond that part to me as like a mummy, as a monster, as an entity.
Yeah, I kind of feel like if this one wasn't compared to the other monster movies, it would be a better movie. Like if we were just looking at movies from the 30s and this was just like a movie that had some magical realism element to it, you'd be like, oh, fairly interesting. But when you compare it, and it is like Boris Karloff, so like you're like, when you compare it to Frankenstein, you're just...
It's a higher bar to clear.
Yeah. And also it's like after Dracula and Frankenstein. So you would think they would just keep getting better, but in my opinion, they didn't. But I mean, they take some different risks, and obviously this movie helped build a genre and a way of storytelling. Like, who knows if you would even have like an Indiana Jones type movie without the first Mummy, you know? So like,
I mean, we wouldn't have Brendan Fraser's amazing movie.
Yeah, exactly.
So there was something good in the story because they have made successful mummy movies.
And it is like an interesting premise, like Xander said earlier, like there are some elements there where you're like, oh, the story is there. And even like the design of the mummy is kind of cool. Like it is there. It's just not, it doesn't fully come together.
Happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's the first one with a score in some scenes, which really helps.
Yeah, it does. And I think this one without a score would be really tough.
But I will say Boris Karloff is great. All the actors, again, are in general very good.
It's cool because it's a different mode for him too. We're just talking about the monster in Frankenstein is very little dialogue, a lot of grunting, a very physical performance. And this one, he's kind of like cool, calm, collected, smooth talking manipulator.
Well, I mean, as general, the effects are all fantastic, which we've talked about.
Yeah, I wish there were more. That's the only thing. I wish this one was full of a bit more of the...
It's too much like in houses, in a museum. Good sets, but it's too much of like just at this place.
Mm-hmm. All right, this one's fallen to the bottom for me. Sorry.
Yeah, this is last.
I'm joking. Yeah, I think it's the bottom
of these ones, like easily. All right, next up on the list, The Invisible Man, 1933. This one kind of rules.
I love this one.
It's just about a freak who does freaky things.
Weird little guy.
He's just such a little dick.
And you'll love him for it.
No, I hate him for it, but I like watching it.
Claude Rains is so good.
The laugh is incredible.
Yeah.
So annoying, but I love it.
That is like an all-time laugh.
This has got to be up there for best laughs in cinema history.
Definitely best evil laughs.
Yeah.
Hey, another reason this movie's great. James Whale back directing.
Yep.
And he just gets better. I feel like he understands what these films are about, and he's very good at getting into what makes these monsters. This one is not as like you can't understand it. He's not as good as Frankenstein's monster. He's definitely an evil person. But I think it works.
But I feel like there's humanity in him, and like it's not his fault that he's doing the evil things that he's doing, because the serum is like making him crazy. Like he's not a bad guy. The serum is making him crazy. He's just like a guy who, again, like similarly to the Frankenstein of it all, like he's obsessed with science and he goes too far, and then the serum is like really what makes him do really bad things.
He doesn't want that food, man.
Interestingly, The one non-monster on this list, the Invisible Man, by far the deadliest.
Well, so according to, stats online, Invisible Man has killed the most people out of any of them with like 130 something, specifically because of that train he derails. Because he says he wants to and then he does one.
He's also just such a bitch about it. Like, there's the part where the police commissioner is like, I don't believe there's an Invisible Man. He's like, I'll show you there's an Invisible Man. I'll kill you. It's like, no, he doesn't know. He's dead.
Men are scarier than monsters.
Love his
No, but I think that's what's really interesting about this movie is it kind of it's more on the nose than the Frankenstein message of just the I don't know, like the ability of human beings to go too far.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's basically if Henry and the monster were one character.
Yeah.
Because that's basically what the Invisible Man is. I mean, obviously they're different stories, but like the pursuit of science for the pursuit of science and just being selfish and wanting to continue to keep pressing those bounds without stopping to think whether or not it's ethical.
Do you ever think about the fact that he's killing all those people like naked as hell?
Yes, I think about it all the time.
Stark naked.
Constantly. Like immediately, as soon as he takes the clothes off, I'm just like, oh.
It just makes him, I don't know, it makes him feel even more just like aloof and just insane.
Yeah.
It's everything he does. He barges into his friend's house and makes him do everything and thinks his friend is just gonna go along with all of this crazy shit he's coming up with.
You gotta admire his dedication though, because his friend is kind of a loser. He's trying to steal his girlfriend before he knows he's gone insane, right?
Yeah.
Then he shows up and he tells his friend, you're gonna help me. His friend betrays him. Probably deserved, but then he goes, I'll kill you at 10 o'clock tomorrow. And
Amazing
his friend
sequence.
goes, you gotta help me, please. They go, we got you, dude. No way he kills you at 10 o'clock tomorrow. Pulls it off.
They come up with a crazy sequence, and then he's just like, I sat here for hours to kill you.
He's playing the long game and he is winning at the long game.
Very dedicated, and I respect it to an extent.
We do have to talk about the Invisible Man effects though, because some of the effects in this movie are so cool. Some of the like invisible effects.
They look so good. They did such a good job.
I think even the ones that are not as good as the other ones are better than some effects that are happening now anyway. Mm-hmm. And they just like, they pull them off with such, like, you really feel like it's happening in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
I love problem solving in filmmaking, and it's cool when you watch the movie and you can see that they did different techniques for different scenes. It depended on what they were doing. You know, there are certain parts where he's carrying a drawer and it's probably a drawer on strings. There's obviously the iconic thing where he unwraps his head. In some of the shots, it's like a shell puppet that they're holding up and unwrapping. And in other parts, they're just matting him on top. It's really cool. And they did a lot of really cool techniques that are insane for 1935 or 1933, sorry.
Just allowing like film exposure and like chemistry is really impressive. Like the idea of using like matte black velvet for him, and then he put clothes on it, and then he shoot it on a velvet black backdrop allows you to like allow the film to see just nothing. It's just such an interesting thing.
So creative.
Yeah, it looks great.
And it really holds up and like is believable when you watch it. Like sometimes you can tell it's like a little trick, but I don't know, it looks better than some little tricks we have now.
The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen when that came out. The 2000s.
It's just so fun. Like one of my favorite effects is when he's fully invisible and he just sits in the chair in front of the fire. Looks so
Lights his little
good. Yeah,
cigarette.
and he lights the cigarette.
It's so cool.
I imagine he's got his legs crossed so that he's covering up a little bit.
He's probably not. He's sitting bare butt on that chair.
I think he's man spreading.
This man definitely does.
I don't think he's really that concerned about anything at this point. Yeah, I don't know if there's something to be said about this one taking a step back in terms of being based on source material, like as The Mummy was not, to it really having more of the like bones that we were complaining about The Mummy not having, because there was so much story to pull from to make like a very clear, cohesive film from. But I mean, obviously insanely successful.
Good book.
Yeah.
Have you even read it?
Yeah, I have.
Oh yeah.
How dare you?
Yeah, you have. I forgot.
How dare
You're the
you?
book nerd on this podcast right now.
Both of those books were my recommendation.
Yeah, I didn't say the word. I didn't take credit for it. All right, where do you guys want to put Invisible Man?
This is number 1 for me. I don't know if that's controversial, but
No, I agree.
wow.
I think this is currently also my number 1 of the ones on the list so far.
Wow.
I think I might have to agree. I love Frankenstein. I think it's so important, but I think the emotional, not just emotional stuff, but the like just the the thematic depths of this one, it might be a little stronger than Frankenstein. So I'll put it number 1 for now.
Wow. I really thought you guys were going to all say Frankenstein.
Next up on the list, the only sequel we're doing. All of these movies have sequels, I believe.
Yes, they all have many, many, many sequels.
Only one deserves to be on the list today because of the iconic character that it created, The Bride of Frankenstein, 1935.
Elsa Lancaster did more in 5 seconds on film for just film history than a lot of people have done in their entire careers.
Barely anything. Well, talking about just her, we didn't even mention in Frankenstein the really great intro that it has, where it's like, it might be spook. And then this one also has a really great intro of another love triangle of this Mary Shelley storyline, which is, it's insane to put at the beginning of this film, really, but I love it.
It's so
but it's also
meta and bizarre.
It's meta and bizarre, but I kind of get it for the time, right? Like, there was no way to see Frankenstein unless it was replaying somewhere.
I think that was cool, yeah.
I loved it.
Lord Byron on the screen.
They fixed her credit.
They did
Yeah, they
her
fixed her credit, yeah.
I love it. We didn't talk about it in the first Frankenstein movie where Boris Karloff is just the question mark
So
for the
cool.
monster for the first one. And then this one, they brought it back with the bride being a question mark again. Like, oh, who is this?
I do love that. That's a sweet touch.
Yeah, it's fun.
I also love the opening credits. I know that like it was just of its time, but like the designed, hand-drawn opening credits, all of these movies have them, and they're so beautiful. I love them.
I think this one pulls a lot more actually from the book that actual Frankenstein left out, and we end up putting in a lot of the real like heavy hitter emotional context moments back into this movie, which I really like.
Allowing the
Totally agree.
Yeah. Allowing the monster to start speaking, to start having some intelligence, which allows you to bring in these other themes, is just a fantastic touch.
The first movie, the only moment I think you really get humanity in the monster is with the little girl right before he kills her in cold blood. But I think that that's a super important part of the character, and I think this movie really explores the ideas that are, like you said, in the book, but also just, what if he's just a guy that got made and he's just looking for a friend, and everybody is judging him before they even know him, and he just doesn't have a chance no matter what he does. And it's really, really a tragic movie.
The scene with the hermit in the cabin in the woods
Makes
is
me
like
cry. It literally
maybe
makes
the
me
best
cry.
scene in any of the movies that we talk about
Yeah,
on
it truly
this
is.
entire podcast. Like that scene is just so emotional.
Also, the introduction of the music in that scene
Yes.
specifically, the character bond that you see there, the friendship build, and then like with the musical cue of the violin, I think it is. Yeah, like it just makes me cry. But I think what Chris was saying about like letting the character grow and learn how to speak, like we see that, but we also, it's just interesting for a monster movie to let the character grow in a direction that's not monstrous. Like the monster, Frankenstein's monster, is like more humanized in this movie and less monstery. There are more fight scenes, I guess, where he's like, but it's because the humans are bothering him.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Well, we introduce a new villain in this one, the other doctor, and it's interesting because this movie allows not only the monster to grow for the better, but it also allows Dr. Frankenstein to grow for the better in a lot of ways. I mean, he ends up eventually getting basically bullied into doing what the villain of the movie wants him to do, but like he is also reckoning with his past mistakes and where he goes from here.
Yeah, he's like, I don't want to keep doing this. Science has gone too far. Yeah. And he meets this other guy. Yeah.
And Dr. Pretorius, who's literally just like the devil. I don't know, like everything about his design, even the actor's face, sorry to the dude, but like he's like literally the devil coming in and making a bargain. He's like, you're going to make this guy for me. And speaking on like the tragedy part, like after the whole hermit thing, the monster's basically like, I shouldn't have been reborn. I just want to die. Like, what's the point of this?
Well, and then like just obviously the final arc of the movie when they do make the bride, and then the bride comes alive and she's like, no, I don't want to be your friend. Like the monster recognizes her autonomy a little bit, and it's just like, no, like neither of us should be alive. You humans go live your life. We're not doing this. Like you don't want to be with me. It's not gonna work.
Yeah, I don't remember the line he says, but it's something like, we all are dead or deserve to be dead.
We belong dead.
We belong dead. It's so good. And that sequence is amazing. And then he pulls it and it just blows up everything. It's just a great sequence for them.
But what a crazy arc from like the first movie, this mob chasing him into a windmill and setting it on fire. And this one, him being the one to be like, yeah, I don't deserve to
I'm
live.
taking me out.
Yeah, it's just
There's no place in the world for him, and he recognizes that.
And no one's going to allow a place for him.
Yeah, and so he's just like, what would be the point? And he knows that that's also true for the bride. If she doesn't want to be with him and they can't have each other, they're both going to have nobody.
Yeah.
So, but it is great. Going back to the bride, the decision she makes is she's just like, nah, dude, not into it.
which is crazy because if you haven't seen this movie, just from the like pop culture
The amount of
lexicon, you would
merch
be
and
like,
everything
oh,
they
like
do.
they're lovers, they love each
She's
other.
called
She
the
literally
bride.
does not like him at all.
She says, I don't.
They walk around the parks at Universal together. Like
Yeah, like holding
the
hands.
disconnect between what people probably think pop culture and what actually is in the movie is crazy. And she's only in this movie. She's not in any of the other sequels, which they make a million of them.
It's a crazy feminist moment in 1935. I mean, in all of these movies, the women are basically just pined after by the man or taken by the monsters or whatever. But the bride herself is made to be the bride of the monster from the first movie and just goes, not into it.
I mean, if you were just born and you saw that dude burnt up, he's already messed up and then he's still burnt from the thing.
be scared.
I'd probably also be like, whoa.
Her reactions are really great. It's a really cool performance. Again,
Yeah, her
Taylor said she's got like
movements.
5 minutes of screen time, but it's a really cool, iconic performance.
Everything from like her design is so iconic. And somehow they outdid themselves with all the other designs they've already made. Just the hair and then her movements is amazing too.
The small people that the other doctor makes in the little glass
my
jars.
gosh.
I think about that all the time, but I love the way that those look. I just, the way that they put that together, which I don't even know,
don't know
how they did it.
No one really understands how
Yeah,
to do it.
That is
like it
movie
looks so
magic.
real. Like they pick them up, they're like in and out of the glass. The interaction between, which I'm assuming the small character actors were interacting with like large objects that they then put on the regular sized film. I don't know what they did, but it looks so incredible.
Again, the effects are somehow outpacing stuff that even Universal would make decades later for their monster movies. It's just insane.
First.
It's first for me too.
It's first for me.
I really wanted to say Invisible Man, but I do think this one is first.
You could say Invisible Man if you want. You're outvoted.
I voted. It doesn't matter.
You could be different.
I'm going to say Invisible Man, actually.
You like Invisible Man more?
Yeah.
Crazy.
I think because I like the book so much, which I also like Frankenstein, the book, and I don't know. There are elements of both that I like, but I'm going to say Invisible Man. Not that it changes the rap.
Does not change it.
Next up on the list, The Wolfman from 1941. A little bit of a jump.
Yeah.
We're jumping around all those sequels that exist.
Yeah. We're going to the new monster, the next big bad wolf, blowing the houses down.
No, what's crazy? This is not even Universal's first Wolfman-like movie in the Universal Monsters canon. This is their second werewolf movie, but the first one no one cares about or remembers.
I will say, we were just talking about a lot of the practical effects. I do find the practical effects in this film to be a little disappointing. The fact that there's a transformation and all we really see is like leg hair grow and then pan up to full wolf.
It's
A
crazy.
lot of feet in this
Yeah.
one.
A lot of the wolf feet.
I think they were
specifically.
really proud of their
Yeah.
prosthetic thing that they did, which
I mean,
I
they're
get.
cool. Yeah, they're cool, but
Could have done a hand.
It is crazy because the sequels to the Wolfman actually have that full transformation that everyone's kind of used to and remembers from pop culture, but not this one really.
I was let down as somebody who, again, has not seen these movies before, but who everybody was talking about, oh, werewolf transformations in movies, dude, they're so cool. And I've seen the transformation for American Werewolf in London, so I was expecting not it to be that graphic per se for 1941, but I was expecting it to be the inspo for that, and I was like, this is nothing compared to that.
I will say his makeup's great.
The makeup
We
looks cool.
We haven't mentioned him yet, but Jack P. Pierce, who does basically all the makeup for all these films, is fantastic. And this Wolfman look is so good. He's wearing a random shirt and pants, which is obvious because they don't want to put hair all over him. But I think his design is really good and obviously iconic because people still think about it really.
one thing about this movie is that the main character whose name I'm forgetting.
Larry Talbot.
Larry Talbot,
obviously.
played by Lon Chaney Jr.
Obviously Larry. I don't like him as a man.
Sucks.
I don't like this little peeping Tom who creeps on a lady with her jewelry. I
Who is
don't like him.
engaged,
Yeah, I
and
don't
he's,
like him.
hunting her for sport.
So like I feel
He's
like
got that dog in him.
It's strange. It is very strange. And I don't know if it was on purpose, but if it was did not go well.
Yeah. And like I feel like the werewolf tragedy is that it's like a good person usually who does bad things when they transform. It's like a Jekyll and Hyde situation. Yeah. When you talk about like monster archetypes. And in this one, I mean, obviously he's not like a monster, but I just don't even care about him. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, he's not a great guy. Like, he seems to have like blown off his family largely because he wasn't like the first heir. He comes back after his brother died, and he's like kind of a jerk to their dad.
Well, they really want to play with the legend. They tell you the legend like 4 or 5 times in the beginning of the movie. And it's kind of an interesting idea of folklore or this belief that some people have, some people don't, and the main character keeps hearing about it, and he's like, well, that's not real, right? And then he's confronted with it, and then ultimately the cycle of violence continues, and exactly what he does happens to him. That whole larger arc is kind of interesting, but yeah, the scene-to-scene stuff doesn't work super well because he's just not a really great character. And I also think that you were saying, Taylor, his relationship with his dad is not great. I think that's a huge miss in this. If they had a closer relationship, for the ultimate end to be that his dad kills him as a wolf, and just go like, what? Could have it be really tragic. When he gets beaten with that little silver stick, I'm just kind of like, eh.
It is missed. Like, there are obviously elements that work, but it's not cohesive. It's a strange film. I like a lot about it. It's definitely the most set bound film of all of them. I kind of get it because the woods are not something you can create really in Southern California where they're shooting this, and it looks good. But I don't know.
I do like feel constrained. Yeah, they're cool.
This like fog thing was supposedly one of the biggest sets at the time, which is crazy to think about now. Yeah. It's strange. It's also really interesting that this is not the originator of most of the werewolf myths, but this is what popularized all of this on film, really. Because most of this stuff has all been out there, like silver bullets, the pentagram kind of thing, all this stuff. This is what everything's based off. Twilight, all that stuff.
Thank you, Wolfman.
Team Edward.
I mean, same.
I was like, what are you rolling your eyes for?
Just assume Bela Lugosi was sparkling.
That's why she's named Bella.
You know what? Maybe.
Saying random
shit.
It might.
Jordan just cracked the fucking code, guys. There's no way that she didn't do that.
This one is above Dracula and Mummy for me.
That's what I was going to say too. So like Mummy, Dracula, Wolfman from the bottom.
I put it above Mummy, below Dracula, because I just think Dracula is more important of a film and maybe more cohesive, even if I think Wolfman is and sometimes better. I don't know.
Yeah, I was between where you guys put it. I think I settled on putting it above Dracula. I thought it was more compelling. Dracula's a little bit more boring, but Dracula is more iconic. I do agree. So it's like, but I'll stick with what I went with of above Dracula. All right, last up on the list, the final monster movie being ranked this spooky season, The Creature from the Black Lagoon, 1954. My
first thought is how different it is from the rest of them. All of them are very much of the era, right, of when they come out. But this is the sci-fi B monster movie. Not that the other ones weren't sci-fi, because Invisible Man and Frankenstein are sci-fi, but this is the sci-fi monster B movie. It's the most different. It's the end of the Monsters universe, really. This and its 2 sequels are the end of it. They went out with a bang for me.
Yeah. I think this one like really brings together all of the building blocks from all of the previous movies and like really makes something of that. There's cool effects, there's good acting, there's cool costumes, locations, makeup. The story makes sense. It has like a very cohesive plot. At no point are you like, what's going on here? It just brings together all the things they learned from 31 to now.
Also a love triangle.
Another love triangle.
Always gotta have love triangle.
This like one might be a love square.
Yeah, if you count the monster.
That little fish man is eyeing that girl.
Gilman, yeah. There's a reason why someone has made a movie about the fish man fucking a lady.
Oscar winning.
Love.
But it does. Oh, talking about the plot, I love this expedition adventure plot. This like old school into the jungle. But it has this like propelling narrative of them not trying to do this thing, but accidentally finding him.
This one is really cool from a plot perspective because it's the only one where the plot is actually, there's a real inciting incident. Every other one, they're already happening when you get in. Frankenstein's already trying to build the monster. Dracula's already munching. The Invisible Man's already invisible. This one, they are just out in the jungle looking around for fossils. They find something and they go, oh, that's interesting. And all of the events that ensue after that are around that one incident. And you're just kind of along for this ride trying to be like, what are they going to find? Oh, shit, there's a fish man down there. It's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like the other compelling ones, the fish gill man is not the evil in this.
No.
Like he's a monster. He's a creature and he's doing what he thinks he needs to do.
He's
the
in his
real
own
evil
natural
is
habitat.
a blonde capitalist man who's the main villain of the story.
Well, it's cool because it's also got that air of mystery. That's something that I feel like was missing from Dracula, one that does have that lore. This one, the characters, nobody knows what this thing is. So when you're watching it, you're just kind of like, whoa, what is that? And then when the characters see it, they're like, whoa, what is that? You have this similar experience to them being like, oh, should we catch it? Is it dangerous? Like, what's going to happen?
They also slow burn build you seeing him, truthfully, until like the characters see him really.
You get a lot of those little hand on the shoulder
Little
shots.
hands, little weird modulated pig sounds and stuff like that.
I love him.
He is the best. But speaking of the most important, not the most important, but one of the biggest parts of this film is the underwater filming is fantastic.
I can't believe how good it looks for the time. I saw some pictures of the camera rigs. They're huge. They're blocky. They're
How
crazy.
did they move them? I don't know.
Really cool.
The whole sequence of her swimming and him swimming with her.
Oh my God.
It's a
so
beautiful, amazing sequence. That poor stuntman, no oxygen tank, in this heavy ass, uncredited, in this heavy ass suit. I know they made it lighter for when he's underwater, but like he's still got to swim in this thing.
Because you're not just swimming. Like, I mean, he's not just swimming. He's performing also.
Yeah.
Like he's swimming in character, which is not easy to do.
The suit is sick. The design is really cool.
Everything about it.
I love how many outfits Kay has on the boat.
Yes.
I'm like, I'm gonna see her suitcase.
That was honestly, they all kind of had like a full wardrobe ready to go for this little expedition.
Why not? You gotta look a little nice while you're on the
I don't
expedition.
know that I would want to go into the Amazon wearing like the skimpiest bathing suit I own,
I don't know
men
if I
and
would
women.
I don't know. Even if without the creature in that water, I would not be swimming in that water if I had a choice.
Just like really crazy that they were like, this should be fine.
I love
Just
that.
dive in.
Yeah, no, she just goes in the middle. She's just like, I'm just gonna take a swim. She swims like 15 feet away from the boat alone in the lagoon where people are known to disappear. Okay, girl,
She's
pop
braver
up.
than me.
Yeah.
Braver.
Yeah, I mean, the Millicent Patrick, too, the costume designer, goes largely uncredited for her contributions to this, which is basically the whole thing.
Yeah.
I feel like, it's always hard to quantify this kind of stuff, but if it was a bad design, would this have become as iconic?
I
Who
don't think
knows?
so.
But people were really latched onto that character and the way that it looks, and so
It
she
looks
deserves some
very real.
Awesome shout outs for
like
that.
especially in the water, like obviously it's a man in a suit, but I feel like as far as the context of all the other monsters we're talking about, it looks very real.
Where do you guys put Creature?
It's number 3 for me, but mine 1 and 2 are different than yours.
I think Creature's number 1 for me.
Number 1 for me as a man wearing a creature shirt right now.
I don't even know. I have such a hard time. I feel like Bride's my favorite, so it would be 2 or 3, but I really like Invisible Man. Yeah, I probably would put it 3rd. I'd probably put it under Invisible Man. Same as you.
Okay, so then it is 2nd because we have it 3rd, they have it 1st.
Right.
So Bride is first and then Creature.
I can feel the pain coming from Chris, but yes.
It's a mistake.
I really liked Creature, but
Yeah, it's a great movie.
I also am really big on Bride for the actually adapting the cool stuff in Frankenstein.
Those top 3 for me are pretty even. I like all of them.
Yeah,
just
same.
depending on my mood, which I would say.
All right, so the Rats on Film official ranking for the Universal Monster movies kicking off spooky season, starting from the bottom: The Mummy, Dracula, The Wolfman, Frankenstein, The Invisible Man, Creature from the Black Lagoon, and The Big Cheese, The Bride of Frankenstein.
Nice.
Glorious.
I don't endorse this list.
Uh-oh. We always got an angry rat. There's always one rat who's mad about the list.
Listen, we can't all agree. That's what keeps it spicy.
Ooh,
I feel like I
it's a
can't
pepper
be.
jack cheese.
I like that for a contentious list. It's a big pepper jack. There will be more spooky lists. I may or may not be on them. We'll see. Well, thanks for listening to Rats on Film, everybody. Tell a friend about the show where we talk about and rank movies. You can follow us on social media, Rats on Film Pod. You can get this podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And we will be back in 2 weeks to talk about and rank more movies.
Imagine there's like a the end card.
Really nice matte painting.
The Universal, like a plane flies by the Universal logo with like a little banner that says the end.
A big band play out.
Yeah.
It says
For
subscribe to
no
Rats.
music and the rest of it.
Like and subscribe, baby.
Bye, everybody.